Hello, welcome back to a reading of Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens, Chapter 3, Part 2. "Certainly," said Miss Nickleby, rubbing her hands, "if Mrs. Nickleby took the apartments without the means of paying for them, it was very unbecoming a lady." "Of course it was, ma'am," said Ralph. "And naturally," continued Miss Nickleby, "I, who am at present an unprotected female, cannot afford to lose the apartments." "Of course you cannot, ma'am," replied Ralph. "Though at the same time," added Miss Nickleby, who was plainly wavering between her good nature and her interests, "I have nothing whatever to say against the lady, who is extremely pleasant and affable, though, poor thing, she seems terribly low in her spirits, nor against the young people either, for nicer or better behaved young people cannot be." "Very well, ma'am," said Ralph, turning to the door, for these encomiums on poverty irritated him. "I have done my duty, and perhaps more than I ought. Of course nobody will thank me for saying what I have." I am sure I am very much obliged to you, at least, sir," said Miss Nickleby in a gracious manner. "Would you do me the favour to look at a few specimens of my portrait painting?" "You're very good, ma'am," said Mr. Nickleby, making off with great speed, "but as I have a visit to pay upstairs, and my time is precious, I really can't." "At any other time when you are passing, I shall be most happy," said Miss Nickleby. "Perhaps you will have the kindness to take a card of terms, will you? Thank you. Good morning." "Good morning, ma'am," said Ralph, shutting the door abruptly after him to prevent any further conversation. "Now for my sister-in-law. Bah!" Climbing up another perpendicular flight, composed with great mechanical ingenuity of nothing but corner stairs, Mr. Ralph Nickleby stopped to take breath on the landing, when he was overtaken by the handmaid, whom the politeness of Miss Nickleby had dispatched to announce him, and who had apparently been making a variety of unsuccessful attempts since their last interview to wipe her dirty face clean upon an apron much dirtier. "What name?" said the girl. "Nickleby," replied Ralph. "Oh, Mrs. Nickleby," said the girl, throwing open the door. "Here's Mr. Nickleby." A lady in deep mourning rose as Mr. Ralph Nickleby entered, but appeared incapable of advancing to meet him, and leant upon the arm of a slight but very beautiful girl of about 17, who had been sitting by her. A youth, who appeared a year or two older, stepped forward and saluted Ralph as his uncle. "Oh," growled Ralph, with an ill-favoured frown, "you are Nicholas, I suppose." "That is my name, sir," replied the youth. "Put my hat down," said Ralph imperiously. "Well, ma'am, how do you do? You must bear up against sorrow, ma'am. I always do." "Mine was no common loss," said Mrs. Nickleby, applying her handkerchief to her eyes. "It was no uncommon loss, ma'am," returned Ralph, as he coolly unbuttoned his spencer. "Husbands die every day, ma'am, and wives too." "And brothers also, sir," said Nicholas with a glance of indignation. "Yes, sir, and puppies, and pug-dogs likewise," replied his uncle, taking a chair. "You didn't mention in your letter what my brother's complaint was, ma'am." "The doctors could attribute it to no particular disease," said Mrs. Nickleby, shedding tears. "We have too much reason to fear that he died of a broken heart." "Pooh," said Ralph, "there's no such thing. I can understand a man's dying of a broken neck, or suffering from a broken arm, or a broken head, or a broken leg, or a broken nose. But a broken heart? Nonsense. It's the cant of the day. If a man can't pay his debts, he dies of a broken heart, and his widow is a martyr." "Some people, I believe, have no hearts to break," observed Nicholas quietly. "How old is this boy, for God's sake?" inquired Ralph, wheeling back his chair and surveying his nephew from head to foot with intense scorn. "Nicholas is very nearly 19, replied the widow. 19, eh?" said Ralph. And what do you mean to do for your bread, sir?" "Not to live upon my mother," replied Nicholas, his heart swelling as he spoke. You'd have little enough to live upon if you did," retorted the uncle, eyeing him contemptuously. "Whatever it be," said Nicholas, flushed with anger, "I shall not look to you to make it more." "Nicholas, my dear, recollect yourself," remonstrated Mrs. Nickleby. "Dear Nicholas, pray," urged the young lady. "Hold your tongue, sir," said Ralph. "Upon my word, fine beginnings, Mrs. Nickleby, fine beginnings." Mrs. Nickleby made no other reply than entreating Nicholas by a gesture to keep silent, and the uncle and nephew looked at each other for some seconds without speaking. The face of the old man was stern, hard-featured, and forbidding. That of the young one, open, handsome, and ingenious. The old man's eye was keen with the twinklings of avarice and cunning, the young man's bright with the light of intelligence and spirit. His figure was somewhat slight, but manly and well-formed. And apart from all the grace of youth and comeliness, there was an emanation from the warm young heart in his look and bearing which kept the old man down. However striking such a contrast as this may be to lookers-on, none ever feel it with half the keenness or acuteness of perception with which it strikes to the very soul of him whose inferiority it marks. It galled Ralph to the heart's core, and he hated Nicholas from that hour. The mutual inspection was at length brought to a close by Ralph withdrawing his eyes, with a great show of disdain, and calling Nicholas a boy. This word is much used as a term of reproach by elderly gentlemen towards their juniors, probably with the view of deluding society into the belief that if they could be young again, they wouldn't on any account. "Well, ma'am," said Ralph impatiently, "the creditors have administered, you tell me, and there's nothing left for you?" "Nothing," replied Mrs. Nickleby. "And you spent what little money you had in coming all the way to London to see what I could do for you?" pursued Ralph. "I hoped," faltered Mrs. Nickleby, "that you might have an opportunity of doing something for your brother's children. It was his dying wish that I should appeal to you in their behalf." "I don't know how it is," muttered Ralph, walking up and down the room, "but whenever a man dies without any property of his own, he always seems to think he has a right to dispose of other people's. What is your daughter fit for, ma'am?" End of Part 2, Chapter 3.